Welcome to the second episode of the Inner Voice podcast. I'm Jordann Christie, and today we have a very special guest joining us. This guest is a powerhouse performer and multi-award winning artist, covering everything from major opera roles to musical theatre, to session work, and even fiddle playing with Australian country music elite. She recently earned her PhD, which focused on how professional female singers achieve vocal freedom when crossing styles. Her connection to the Newcastle Conservatorium spans 4 decades. On a personal note, she was my vocal coach when I studied at uni and remains a friend. Please help me in welcoming Dr Sue Carson.
Hello, Geordie. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. Welcome, welcome. I thought that we might start with where you started musically. How old you were when you started playing instruments? Was it instruments first or vocals first?
Yeah, okay. So I was 7, really, I think, when I first started an instrument. At the same time, actually, in primary school, I was playing trombone, and then I changed to violin when I was 12. So when I was playing the piano, I enjoyed it, and to my regret, I didn't continue with the piano. But I seemed to have more affinity with strings. So played trombone in primary school and gave that up sort of towards the end of primary school because my mum played the violin as a child and sang as well, and she had a violin at home, which happened to be stored under my bed. Oh. So it was always like, get the violin out and just look at it and want to play it. And also guitar. I played guitar in primary school, which I still play now. So it was I couldn't tell you exactly what years I started everything, but I landed on the violin as my main instrument when I was in early high school because I just desperately wanted to play it. And so it was a bit late to start the violin, actually. And I played that forever. Yeah, so did all my grades while I was at school and did 8th grade violin in Year 12, which was a really dumb decision because I was very busy.
It's common though, isn't it? I think that if people start exams in school, they kind of carry them through, and if they're lucky and they work hard enough, they kind of finish at 8th grade at that kind of end of school.
Yeah.
At least it was that way even when I studied at the con, your prerequisite of your exams, not as much these days. I feel like you started on hard level to start at trombone, violin and piano before you started singing, but it would have been helpful for you singing.
Yeah, and I sang all through school in musicals and choir, and I was in orchestras, during my high school years, but I didn't actually have formal vocal training until I was 18.
Wow.
Yeah, so I started having lessons with Irene Moore, who was an amazing teacher, incredible. She was an opera singer, and she'd returned to Australia. She had an extensive career in Vienna, Austria, and then came back and was teaching. And Mum said to me at 18, I was just starting uni, and she said, why don't you have formal lessons? And I thought, okay, because I loved singing and it was a very natural thing for me to do, but not something I was trained in, So I went and had these lessons and opened up a whole new world for, I suppose, my technique and just how to use my voice, and ended up doing a fair bit of opera in my 20s and musicals, and at the same time working in a folk rock band playing fiddle and mandolin.
I was going to ask this as well. Have you always been drawn to different genres? So the influence of your parents perhaps just all through, obviously already playing so many different instruments. So it kind of came naturally for you to just be playing a lot of different genres as well?
Definitely. It happened by virtue of wanting to play lots of instruments, I guess, and also, yes, listening to different music when I was growing up, because my siblings were into all sorts of contemporary music. My brother actually loved classical music but didn't play anything. My brother Drew still loves classical music to this day, listens to it regularly. Mum was a mad piano concerto fan. Dad loved Louis Armstrong and jazz and Percy Faith. And my sister was particularly into probably, rock, 70s rock, but also bands like Heart, which was rock, but and sort of the more folky kind of side of rock, folk rock stuff. So it just all happened that I listened to all those influences, and then because I needed a job when I was starting uni, I went into this folk rock band, which became Sligo Maid. It was
I've written that down to ask you about when I did some digging, but it's so interesting.
So it was originally called the Crocodile Mountain Band, which was a bush band, and I auditioned for that. And so we started doing fiddle gigs, like I started doing bush band gigs. And I replaced Mick Allbeck. So he was massively amazing fiddle player at the time in the country scene. It was like a big shoes to fill. It was like, terrifying. But I just sort of stuck to kind of fiddle tunes and things that I could read, and then I got used to improvising, and that kind of happened over the years as well. I got much better at being able to get up and sort of play along with things without really preparing, if that makes set the session kind of vibe. Yeah. Yeah, so anyway, the Crocodile Mountain Band kind of disbanded, and then we became Sligo Maid, which was more folk rock based. So we did Steel Eye Span and, bands like that.
How old would you have been, do you think?
19.
Yeah, so still kind of late teens, early adulthood. Did you grow up in Newcastle the whole time?
Grew up in Brisbane until I was 7.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was born in Brisbane and then moved to Newcastle when I was 7 with my whole family.
So most of your music experience has been here.
Yeah.
Which just goes to show what a force to be reckoned with and what a recognisable, amazing person that you are in the area, because you've just been here the whole time. Just so nice.
I've been here a long time, yeah. Because why would I move? I mean, the thing was, I suppose when I think about the career I may have had if I had have left Newcastle, it may have been looked very different. It may have been more specialised. And I did sort of have a go, at the opera career for a little while there.
You studied in the UK too, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I went over for a while and had lessons with Victor Morris from the English National Opera, a couple with Gerald Martin Moore, who was an amazing repetiteur. But I went at a bad time for auditions. So I ended up spending a lot of time in Dublin. I went between Dublin and London. I played fiddle in Dublin, and then I came back to London, and
that only would have helped with the Celtic influence of everything, right?
Yeah, and I also had a great time, being a young person, but then came back, and because my dad got very ill, he was ill before I left, and so that was a sliding doors moment. If Dad hadn't have been sick, maybe I might have stayed there, and I may not have ended up here. But I came back to make sure I had spent the last couple of years with my dad, and then, just kept working here and started to teach privately. And
gosh, you've carved out.
Gigged a lot.
Just an absolute stellar career as a working musician, which I want to talk about. But before we move on from kind of your youth and your teens, if you had any advice for students out there in their teens and their youth, or anything that you can kind of pinpoint even from your own teaching, what kind of advice do you have for students that age?
Take every opportunity. That's it. If you... I know some musicians fear doing too much, or they fear not getting enough gigs, or they fear overcommitting themselves. But I think more opportunities you take, the more skills you build, the more confidence you build, the more ability to respond in any scenario. Yeah. Because this is the thing about, being a performer, and the fact that most musicians these days need to be portfolio musicians. Yep. It's very difficult to make a living as a specific, concert pianist, or, can do that, but it's a bit like actors, the top 3% are the ones that can just do that thing that they do. So the way that the music trend, the music industry is heading, and do what you love. And also, I would say, find a way, if you're not motivated to practice, find a way to make that happen. Yeah. Yep. Because it can be tedious, and it's sometimes, we don't want to practice. But practice the things you're not good at instead of the things you're good at.
I absolutely agree. And I think I said a similar thing in the first episode. I had some practice tips. 15 minutes a day doesn't work for everyone. If it's an hour, every couple of days, you just need to find something that works for you, because it isn't a one-size-fits-all scenario. You need to be practicing. But I agree with you on the note of versatility and trying to take all the opportunities and maybe not pigeonholing yourself. I think that musicians these days have to be as versatile as they can be, obviously doing things that they like within their scope. But I give similar advice, and I think that when I was at uni, when I first went to uni, I did the first semester with a classical teacher before I swapped to Sue. I'd heard how amazing Sue was, and that she did both classical and contemporary, because at that stage you were already known for your work in the cross-genre realm. So I had that same kind of choice where I was like, do I keep doing classical or do I try and do contemporary, something I hadn't done before that would potentially give me a little bit more to work with as I got older, I suppose. Good advice. Yeah. Good advice.
But also, I suppose, the other side of that is you may not kind of get to that point where you're an absolute expert in one genre, but it just depends, what sort of person you are and what sort of discipline you want to create for your practice in your life. If you want to head for just that opera singing career, go for it.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I think as far as opportunities, keep your mind open to it, I guess.
Yeah. I love that. Thank you so much. Thank you for listening to the Inner Voice podcast. I'm your host, Jordann Christie. If you'd like to stay up to date with everything podcast related, we are at Inner Voice Vocal on YouTube and all of your listening apps, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Thank you for being with us, and we'll see you in the future episodes. So you studied in Newcastle. That's where you did your arts degree?
Yeah, I did arts degree, and I majored in drama and languages. So that was fabulous for my opera singing.
It would have been.
Yeah, so knowing French and German. I didn't do Italian, which, Italian opera is, the opera. But the French, derivative of the French language, similar sort of, it's a Romance language, same as Italian. So there's similar.
So French is your thing?
Yeah, French is my thing. French and German, love both those. Still sort of speak a bit of French, but because I haven't practiced for years, it's a bit, hard to find the opportunities. However, I do love the language, yeah. So that was great. I did drama, absolutely loved drama, and used all those skills in all the theatrical music work I did.
When did your relationship with the conservatorium actually begin?
Lessons?
Yeah, you started there initially having lessons and in the ensembles, didn't you?
Yeah,
and that was like your beginning of your relationship with the conservatorium here.
Yeah, I was learning violin from June James, who I think taught at the con as well as privately. Right. I was having lessons with her. So that we had concerts often at the con that were combined student concerts. And then when I was really early in the piece, because I only started learning at 12, and by the time I was 14 or 15 in year 9, I was in the junior conservatorium orchestra, the children's orchestra. And that was an amazing experience. I was in that for a couple of years. I used to go to concerts there, and my parents went to concerts there, and the network of people that you meet, everyone in the town at that time, they all knew each other within theatre and music, and there was a lot of, we were going to things all the time. Unlike these days where a lot of young people don't necessarily go to see classical concerts. I mean, some do, but I think back in the day it was a lot more, what you did and going to excursions at school and, to see orchestras in Sydney. And, so that was all a wonderful kind of training ground for me, or listening as well, and learning different styles of music.
Yeah. And so you started at the con in your ensembles. How did you end up finding yourself working there? How did all of that kind of transpire and come about? Okay,
so I didn't start teaching at the con until 2004. So that's 20 years. So I just got my 20-year service certificate.
Congratulations.
Thank you. But I didn't become an academic until about 2008, really, when I was put on to a fixed term contract. Did some subjects in the diploma of tertiary teaching, which was fantastic because that taught me how to teach tertiary level. But prior to that, I worked all gigs. It was all private, gigs and private teaching. But then had the opportunity to be a community music teacher through the con, and then ended up in the tertiary program.
Lucky us.
Then built up from there with more work, more contemporary students as well. So I was teaching classical and contemporary voice. Adjacent to that, I was lecturing in lots of the subjects as well. So repertoire and performance and music industry, which I'm teaching this semester. So.
Yay. Let's have a little chat about your current role at the con.
Okay.
So at the moment, you're the coordinator of the conservatorium?
My role name's changed. I've gone back to more tertiary teaching. Mm-hmm. So I had in 24 and 25, I was the community program leader, which was called the conservatorium coordinator was the title, which means I was coordinating all the community programs, the one-to-one lessons, any ensembles, looking after the ensembles, looking after the staff, all the staff that are teachers at the community level, and then needed me to step back into some teaching. So that's what I'm doing.
What a gift for the students.
Thanks. No, I'm actually really enjoying it, being back in front of the tertiary students. Yeah, so I'm teaching performance and music industry. 3 courses at the moment, 2 performance and 1 music industry. But my conservatorium academic lead role is like 2 days a week, and what that is the same thing, really, as the coordinator, which is overseeing all the community programs and making sure that they're running smoothly, and also being that conduit or straddling the community and tertiary programs so that there's some, kind of pathway, looking at ways to integrate those programs or to make sure that what we're delivering in the tertiary program and the community program kind of, are sensible transitions from the community to tertiary. That's not an easy thing.
No.
But
sounds win-win.
Yeah.
Because the community program still gets you, and then the tertiary students have access to you as well, which I'm so stoked about just for my students coming up through the con that you're more in a teaching role, because it'd be so wonderful for them to have your influence.
Oh,
so that's exciting.
It's like I said, I'm really enjoying it, and so that's what's happening at the moment.
In that role, you've inspired so many people, not just myself, but there's like a large community of alumni students that are doing so well. Do you reflect on that often?
I do, yeah. And I see a lot of you, which is beautiful. It's really nice to stay in touch with the students that I taught during the degree. I'm really proud to have been part of the journey of a lot of my students who went through the tertiary program, because tertiary level education, higher education it's a big step for people. It's a big, expense. It's a big time of their lives, and being able to help shape their careers and be part of, the next step in their lives is very special. I'm so proud to see that many of my students have gone on to have these wonderful careers and they're wonderful teachers like yourself. And so many of my students are teaching and, flying the flag for singing. It's great.
I'd say it's absolutely mutual, not just myself, but as I said, there's a whole group of us that catch up with you regularly, and it's so lovely. And I've only just started, I think, to reflect on my own teaching, and I don't have as many tertiary, have had students come through and also get to have you, which is wonderful, come through the con. But yeah, I've only just started reflecting myself, and so I was thinking about how it must feel to reflect on that at a higher level, I suppose. And I just want to say thank you to you from myself, but the huge amount of alumni that you have, and to feel like we've got your support even once we're finished, and just really nice.
Oh, thank you.
So it's lovely to have you here and lovely to chat to you and pick your brain. Thank you for tuning in to today's podcast. Are you looking for music lessons? If you're local to the Newcastle, New South Wales area, you can join us at our Merriweather campus, or you can explore online lesson options at www.innervoicevocal.com. Looking forward to seeing you in a lesson soon. I would love to chat a little bit more about your PhD if we can. Because the PhD that you received 2024, so only a couple of years ago, investigated how professional female singers find vocal freedom when crossing genres, which has absolutely been your area of expertise for a very, very long time. You're using various methods, including somatic approaches, but what drove you to research that specific challenge? Just your own experience?
It made sense to pick a PhD topic that I love and that I do. That's the thing. Anyone who's considering PhDs out there might like to think about what they do and how much they love it, and what they want to find out more about it. So I interviewed 18 women who are also multi-genre singers. And then I wrote an album of 9 songs I wrote myself, and 4 songs were covers. And I recorded those songs. I did all the the backings for those songs separately with colleagues. And then I spent about 8 weeks at the end of 2021 into 2022 recording all the vocals for those songs. So I deliberately wrote the songs in the styles, in several styles. So there's about 9 broad styles on the album, and some of those songs have 9 styles in them. So there's one song called Life Story, which is my life story in styles and lyrics, talks about my whole journey from, singing Gilbert and Sullivan when I was in my teens right through to funk or soul or jazz or whatever I do now, and contemporary stuff. It's so detailed and crazy that I sort of was only supposed to write 40,000 words for my thesis and ended up writing 77 because there was
shows you so passionate about it, though.
So much to say. So, it was an amazing undertaking and incredibly rewarding.
Can you take us through some of your findings with the PhD?
The findings are pretty much in the last chapter. So if you'd like to have a read,
it's accessible. We can find it.
It actually sums everything up. But leading up to that last chapter were sort of 3 main chapters. So the creative processes chapter and the technical processes and then the last chapter. So I suppose the creative processes were, I went through each song and I said this happened in this song from a creative perspective. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So what was I thinking? And I came up with 3 modes in my creative process, which I called technical me, significant other, and sensational synthesis. And what that was technical me was this sense that when I'm singing, I can't get away from the technical obsession. Yeah. So I'm thinking absolutely about the position of my body, where my tongue is, what my mouth's doing, everything. And then the significant other was when I was in a mode where I was thinking about or drawing on other pedagogies and some of the stuff that the ladies that I interviewed said.
Yes. Yep.
As well. So drawing on their wisdom as well as all the pedagogies that have researched throughout my life and used.
Yep.
And then the sensational synthesis was a flow state when I didn't think about anything. So people would probably know a lot about flow or have heard of flow.
Yeah.
It's a real thing, And that was when I kind of would have these moments. Probably one of them was when I was singing a song called Beautiful One. It's got this big improvisation in the middle, which is a bit Great Gig in the Sky-ish, Pink Floyd-ish sort of thing. And it was just absolute joy and elation, and I wasn't thinking about it, and I was just being me, and I was trying to combine everything I know.
Yeah.
So that chapter, creative processes, was all about those 3 modes. Then I had the technical chapter, which was setting out all the parameters. So all the real technical stuff, like what was I thinking about? How did things inform other things? And there's so many tables with so many combinations of what do I do for rhythm, between classical and rock, or what do I do for rhythm between soul and folk, and, and just writing down everything and using the songs as examples or the parts of the songs. And then the last chapter goes through and with a whole lot of broader categories from those findings that says, well, there are certain synergies between styles in a broader sense, and then lots of tables that actually have, left and right axis, and then an arrow going up between, which was like where do the styles sit? This might be body awareness, and this might be breath flow or something like that. And what happens with what are the crossover with the styles? So it's very, very complex and hard to explain in 25 words or less, but
I just think that it's so interesting and so helpful, because as a teacher, when you're doing that sort of thing, a lot of it is like, feels like this, sounds like this. So I think it's so helpful to have it kind of manualised and charted. Even though you're saying so many charts, hard to explain, I think there would be people who would absolutely enjoy it, as I did, flicking through.
Oh, I hope so, because, it's while it's complex, I suppose you could, hone in on the parts of it that you want to know about as well, because it does kind of set out, even if you did a search for the word rock or, pop or whatever
you
you
could
want to
just
do.
look at the bits that you're most
pick
interested
out
in.
those sort of findings, yeah.
So helpful for people who have maybe had classical training their whole lives and wanting to look at different styles, or vice versa, have done a lot of pop contemporary and then thinking, I'd love to try some classical. Has your work with this PhD informed your current teaching?
Absolutely. I think I'm looking at my students, I guess, from the perspective of what suits them as well. So, you always do that as a singing teacher.
Yep.
But now I have, I guess, a lot more understanding of the technical challenges for each of the styles and what comes naturally. Because I found when I was doing my PhD, this was a major finding, was that some things were just so easy, natural to me.
Yep.
And other things I had to work so hard at. So I'm trying to observe that in my students and go, no, actually, let's not pursue that because we might be better off going down this track.
Yeah, or coming at it from a different angle.
Yeah, and it's simple things like, the ability or the natural affinity that a student has with agility, for instance. They mightn't be very flexible with their voice. So maybe do something else to develop that and let them, work on that when they're a bit more advanced, So it's like not biting off more than you can chew and realising your limitations initially as a singer. The challenges I just found when I was recording all the music that I couldn't get the right tone for soul, which was really weird. And it was, why can't I get this tone that I want? I wanted a tone like Tori Kelly, thank you. Tori Kelly, I think she's actually Latino though. I think she's a bit so.
Yeah,
but I was sort of trying to model myself on that. No, that's not working either. Why isn't this working for me? I'm not Beyonce. I'm not African American. There's going to be a big issue there. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. But then I went. I was talking to a colleague, Marissa Soroka, actually, and she said, I'm really struggling. She was an R&B singer, and I'm really struggling with this song. And she said, what about Tina Arena? You already sound like her. Why don't you, take that approach? And I went, oh, duh. It's a really, light bulb moment. Yeah. And that just fixed it. And so there was imitation. I was using imitation. Yeah. But I was also not expecting myself to be something I wasn't. So
I love that because I feel like it would also contribute to the flow state that you talk about in there as well when we're working with singers' natural ability before, as you say, biting off more than we can chew, or them just wanting to be really amazing at musical theatre straight away and then coming at it at different angles so that they can then attack, that genre more easily. And they're going to have a lot more joy in their learning process if you're able to work with them until they can get to that point.
Very true. I tried to sort of bring it down into major findings, like I said, in that last chapter.
Sounds so interesting and so useful. I'm not sure whether we can listen to the album though. Are you planning to release the album of songs?
I am, and the reason I haven't is because I've been thinking about the fact that every song is so different and that it might make more sense to release sort of one song at a time.
I was going to ask about that actually. I think it would also be really interesting to listen to everything side by side and hear how one exceptional, amazing voice transverses all of those genres. Did you record, when you did your vocal sessions, did you record some of them at the same time or did you record them all separately? Did you find you had to kind of focus in on, okay, this session I'm doing the jazz song or this session I'm doing the rock song? Did you have to really hyper-focus?
I deliberately sang the different styles in the songs in the same session.
Yeah, I was hoping so.
Yeah, because that
to
was
really
the process.
Test yourself. Yeah.
So in Product, there's a song called Product, which is kind of about, the commoditisation of women in pop music, I guess.
It's got a message.
Yep. And it starts with music theatre sound, sort of a bit like Roxy from Chicago. Yeah. And it goes into like a Kylie Minogue-ish middle section, and then there's an opera solo, and then it goes back to the Kylie Minogue sort of sound, but sort of a bit more rocky.
I can't wait. And we can't access this really, can we?
Well, yes. I mean, this is a really good conversation to have right now because I was thinking yesterday I need to do this thing. And, so I think releasing it all at once is important, like you say, and I suppose I was thinking of singles, from a marketing perspective, meaning,
and that's kind of how it goes these days, isn't it?
But having said that, I really want to get it out there and I do want to do a concert as well of the songs. So that is hopefully going to happen as soon as possible within the next year, 12 months.
Wonderful.
I'm going to really put my time into releasing it online. And also I may not go, streaming services like traditional streaming services. It is a piece of research.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so I feel like I want that research that album to reach people in voice research. And so therefore I'm thinking about what distribution I do. But yeah, thanks for that. It's actually affirming because it's something I need to do really soon.
Yeah, the more I read of the PhD, the more I was interested to hear it and hear it, in that order. But that's just me. I'm sure I would enjoy listening to them all separately, especially when looking at those different styles.
Yes.
So we've had a little chat about some things coming up for you. You're planning to release your 13-track album that goes with the PhD, which is really exciting. Current projects. Bob Corbett and the Roograss Band has just released a couple of singles, Disclaimers and Surfer Farmer, both going very well. We just returned from Tamworth with them. And there's a Mother's Day show coming up.
There is, yep. Mother's Day at Flamingos on
Wonderful.
the 10th of May. So we're looking forward to that. The boys said to me, do you want to play on Mother's Day? And I said I'd just love to do that.
Yeah.
Because Mother's Day,
While
I love Mother's Day and you consider what your kids are doing, it's actually Mother's Day is about you. So I'd much rather be doing something that I really love, which is playing with the Roograss Band, because it's just, I was describing playing with those guys as kind of like soul food. It's really fun and it's a special combination.
And you're doing a little bit of everything. You're singing, fiddle playing. Do you do mandolin in that as well?
Yeah. Yep.
So a little bit of everything.
Lots of harmonies and violin and mandolin. And as far as other projects are concerned, we're releasing the album as soon as I can. And then there's concerts that come up at the con as well. So there's a few things potentially happening in New Annual, which I'm not sure, I can't confirm what they are yet. Okay. But yeah,
secret.
The main thing is to keep my normal gigs going with Love That Hat. So Love That Hat's been going for 30 years, more than 30 years now. And that's with Michael Stove and Dave Carter. And we play regularly around town and have been doing for a very long time and still enjoying that. So
it's always a good night out with Love That Hat. Gorgeous Sue, we've come to the end.
Aww.
Thank you.
I don't want to go.
Just come back. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really, really appreciate it. I'm sure that anyone listening to this will get so much out of our conversation. Thank you so much for all that you do for the Newcastle community, not just the vocalists, but the whole community of musicians in Newcastle, not just in your work through the con, but as an avid performer. Thank you for being someone to look up to as a performer and an educator in the scene, and always still being there for your little alumni students. So thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks, Geordie. It's so nice to spend time with you and to have a chat about this and just everything you're doing. This podcast is wonderful. I can't wait to see the other episodes, and thanks again for having me.
Thank you, Sue. I'd like to say another huge thank you to Dr. Sue Carson for joining me on the podcast today. I'm in the process of booking future episodes. Who would you like to see on the Inner Voice podcast? I'm looking for anyone obsessed with vocals, Newcastle musicians, national vocalists and musicians, academics, anyone working actively in the Newcastle community. I would love to speak to you. If you have any suggestions, pop them in the comments below.